24 years of marriage taught me I was wrong about a lot of things. My name is Daniel Mercer. I am 52 years old. I own a mid-sized landscaping company in Columbus, Ohio, employ 17 people, coach youth soccer on Saturday mornings when the weather allows, and until 8 months ago, I believed my wife, Sandra, was my best friend in the world. I want to tell you exactly how it happened. Not the soap opera version people share on social media, the real version. The quiet, ordinary, devastating version that starts not with a dramatic scene but with a dinner reservation. The reservation Sandra told me she was going out with her work friend Gina on a Thursday evening in late October. I remember the season because the leaves were still burning orange and red on the maples outside our kitchen window, and I'd been thinking all day about which crew to send for a leaf cleanup job in Bexley. She left at 6:30, hair done, new blouse, navy blue with small pearl buttons. She smelled different. Not bad, just different. A perfume I didn't recognize. I didn't think anything of it. That's the part that still stings most. I didn't think anything of it. After 24 years, I trusted Sandra the way I trusted the foundation under our house. You don't inspect it every day. You just live on top of it. At 9:15, I got a text from my buddy Marcus, who works at a restaurant called Hartwell's on the east side. Hey man, don't want to be the one to say this, but I just saw Sandra here. She's not with Gina. She's with some guy I don't recognize. They're in a booth by the window. Looked pretty cozy. Sorry, brother. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where Sandra and I had eaten breakfast every morning for 19 years, since we'd moved into this house. The same table where our son Caleb had done his homework. Where we'd signed the papers to refinance the mortgage. Where I'd held her hand when her mother passed. I sat at that table for 45 minutes and didn't move. The kind of man I am. I want to be honest with you about who I am, because I think it matters. I am not a man who yells. I am not a man who throws things or pounds his fist or makes scenes. My father was that man, and I decided at 17 that I would not carry that particular inheritance forward. What I am is methodical, patient. When something breaks, I wanted to understand why it broke before I decide how to fix it, or whether it can be fixed at all. So I didn't drive to Hartwell's. I didn't call Sandra's phone 14 times. I didn't text her something I'd regret. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, sat back down, and I thought. By the time Sandra came home at 11, cheeks flushed, story ready about how Gina was going through a hard time and needed to vent, I had already moved to the first wave of everything. The shock, the nausea, the strange, hollow feeling of watching someone you love become a stranger in the space of a single text message. I let her tell me about Gina. I said, "That's tough. I hope she's okay." I went upstairs, brushed my teeth, and lay in the dark next to my wife of 24 years, listening to her breathe, wondering how many other Thursday nights there had been. What I found, I'm not proud of the next part. I want to say that clearly. Over the following 2 weeks, I hired a private investigator named Carol Hutchins, a former sheriff's deputy who ran a quiet one-woman operation out of an office above a dry cleaner on Morse Road. She was professional, thorough, and completely without sentiment, which was exactly what I needed. What Carol found was this. Sandra had been seeing a man named Troy Bellamy for approximately 9 months. He was 46, divorced, worked in pharmaceutical sales, and lived in a townhouse in Dublin. They met at a professional networking event Sandra had attended the previous January. He drove a silver BMW and took Sandra to restaurants that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. 9 months. Our 30-year wedding anniversary would have fallen in the middle of it. Carol gave me a folder. I opened it once, looked at 2 photographs, and closed it. I didn't need to see more. I already knew everything that mattered. I called my attorney, a man named Phil Donahue, who'd handled a contract dispute for my business 3 years prior. I'd liked him. Direct. No drama. I told him what I had. "How do you want to handle this?" Phil asked. "Clean," I said. "Fast. Fair." "Okay," he said. "Let's get started." The day she was served, I chose a Wednesday. Sandra worked from home on Wednesdays, which meant she'd be at the kitchen table, that same table, when the process server knocked. I was on a job site in Westerville when it happened, a new commercial property, hedges and drainage. The kind of steady work that keeps a crew busy and keeps your hands useful when your mind wants to spiral. I'd brought my own truck that day, specifically so I'd have something to do with my body. At 10:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Phil's assistant confirming delivery. I set the phone back in my shirt pocket. I picked up a shovel. I helped dig. There's something about physical labor, real labor, not the gym kind, that cuts through everything else. The ground doesn't care what's happening in your marriage. The roots don't move because you're in pain. You dig, or you don't dig. That simplicity was the only thing that felt honest to me that morning. Sandra called 4 times between 11 and noon. I let them all go to voicemail. She texted, "Daniel, what is this? Please call me." Then, "Daniel, I can explain, please." Then, after a long silence, "I'm so sorry." I read all 3. I didn't respond to any of them. The conversation I hadn't planned that evening. I came home because it was still my house and I wasn't going to be driven out of it. Sandra was sitting in the living room. She'd been crying. Her eyes were swollen, her mascara long gone. She was holding the papers loosely in her hands, the way you hold something you don't know what to do with. She looked at me when I walked in, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd married. 28 years old, laughing in a parking lot in the rain after a movie had sold out, and we'd ended up just driving and talking for 3 hours instead. The woman who'd held Caleb when he was 12 hours old and looked at me like I'd handed her the whole world. The woman who'd sat with me in an ER waiting room for 6 hours when my father had his first heart attack, never once suggesting she should go home and get some rest. That woman was in there somewhere. She was also a woman who had spent 9 months lying to my face. I sat down across from her. "Don't tell me it didn't mean anything," I said. That was the first thing out of my mouth. "Don't do that to either of us." She nodded, swallowed. Her hands were shaking slightly. "It did mean something," she said quietly. "That's the honest answer." I respected that, even though it gutted me. "Why?" I asked, not angry. Just, I needed to understand the architecture of it, the way you want to understand why a wall cracked, not so you can scream at the wall, but so you know what actually failed. Sandra took a long breath. She told me she'd felt invisible for years, that she'd tried to tell me, and I think she had tried, in the small ways people try when they don't know how to say the big thing. And she'd felt like I wasn't listening, that Troy had made her feel seen, known, like she was interesting again. I sat with that. I wanted to argue. I wanted to list every vacation we'd taken, every anniversary dinner, every time I'd come home and asked how her day was. But I understood, somewhere beneath the anger, that love isn't just about showing up. It's about paying attention in the specific ways the other person needs to be paid attention to. And maybe, I had stopped doing that somewhere along the way. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I assumed love was enough and stopped asking whether it was landing the way she needed. That doesn't excuse what she did. I want to be clear. Understanding someone's reasons is not the same as accepting their choices. She could have come to me. She could have asked for couples counseling. She could have told me she was drowning instead of swimming towards someone else. But I understood. "I'm not going to fight this," I told her. "I'm not going to drag it out or make it ugly. We're going to divide things fairly. And Caleb, even though he's grown, doesn't need to be put in the middle of anything." She started crying again. I didn't want it to end like this. "I know," I said, "but this is how it ended. What 24 years looks like when it's being divided. Our son Caleb is 26. He lives in Pittsburgh with his girlfriend and works in urban planning. When I called to tell him, I could hear him trying to hold himself together for my sake, and I loved him fiercely for it. 'Are you okay, Dad?' He kept asking. 'I'm going to be,' I told him. And I meant it, even though I wasn't yet. Dividing a life is strange work. You'd think after 24 years there would be an obvious line, his and hers, before and after. But it doesn't work like that. Everything is tangled. The furniture chosen together, the investment accounts grown together, the habits, the memories, the reflexes. We're low on coffee. Did you call the plumber? Your mother called? All of it built over 2 decades until the marriage wasn't something you were in. It was something you'd become. Phil kept the legal side clean. Sandra didn't contest much. She moved into an apartment in Clintonville in December. I kept the house because I wanted the yard and because I'd built the back garden with my own hands over 5 summers and I wasn't ready to give it up. She didn't end up with Troy Bellamy, as it turned out. That chapter closed on its own within weeks of the papers being filed. I don't know the details. I didn't ask. It wasn't my business anymore. The unexpected part. Here is something no one tells you about ending a long marriage. The loneliness isn't sharpest at night. It's sharpest in the ordinary moments. The first time you have to decide what to eat for dinner and realize there's no one else's preference to consider. The first time something funny happens and you reach for your phone to text her and stop yourself. The first time you get good news. A big contract. A compliment from a client. And there's no one waiting at home who already knows all the context, all the backstory, all the reasons why this particular win matters. That's when it hits you, not the betrayal. The loss of the witness. The person who has been watching your life alongside you for 24 years and holds all that shared history in their memory alongside yours. I went to therapy. I want to say that plainly because I think men of my generation are trained to act like that's a weakness. It wasn't. It was the most useful thing I did. My therapist, Dr. Anita Reyes, helped me understand that grief and anger are not the same thing, and that I was entitled to feel both without letting either one become my permanent address. I grieved. I was angry. I moved through both. 8 months later, it's now late June. The yard has never looked better. I've had more time and more need for the work. I have a container garden on the back patio that I started from seed in February, which is something I'd always meant to do and never got around to. Caleb came home for Father's Day weekend. We grilled on the back patio Saturday evening and watched a game that neither of us was fully paying attention to, and he told me about a project he's working on, a transit corridor redesign in Pittsburgh, and I asked questions and actually listened, and it was one of the better evenings I've had in recent memory. I ran into Sandra once at a grocery store in March. It was brief and civil. We asked about each other's families with the careful politeness of people who once knew everything about each other and now know very little. It was awkward and sad and also somehow okay. I have not started dating. I'm not in a hurry. There's a woman in my Saturday morning soccer coaching circle, a pediatric nurse named Marlene, recently widowed, funny and sharp, and with absolutely no patience for nonsense, who I think I might ask to dinner sometime. Not yet, but sometime. What I know now, I know that 24 years is not nothing, even when it ends. I know that a marriage can fail without either person being entirely a villain. I know that staying silent about what you need, whether you're Sandra or whether you're me, is its own slow damage. I know that being served divorce papers in your kitchen on a Wednesday morning is one of the more clarifying experiences a person can have, because it removes every ambiguity and forces you to decide, right now, who you want to be going forward. I chose fast. I chose clean. I chose to take my anger and do something constructive with it instead of letting it fester into something that would rot the rest of my life. I had her served because drawing it out would have only served the wound. I had her served because 24 years deserved an ending with some dignity still intact. I had her served because I respected myself enough not to spend the next 3 years pretending. And I'll tell you this. The man who sat at that kitchen table in October, numb with a bourbon glass in his hand, reading a text from Marcus, that man was afraid of what came next. He couldn't see past the loss. He thought the loss was everything. It wasn't. I'm still here. The maples outside the kitchen window are coming back this summer, greener than ever. The garden is full of things I planted myself. My son called me last Tuesday just to talk. Not because anything was wrong, just because he wanted to. I'm still here, and there is, it turns out, quite a lot of life on the other side of the thing you were most afraid of. Daniel Mercer, Columbus, Ohio.